and then visit about some things that may be on your mind, because should be a lot on your mind if you take a look at what's happening around the world today. And the beauty of Wyoming is, it's funny because I get into these disagreements with the senators from New York and California, because they say, how many senators do you get in Wyoming? So we get 2. And how many people live there? Only 500,000 people. In California, they get 2. New York gets 2. And a lot of it has to do with the founding fathers and their wisdom, even though they have many more people in those states. So I always refer them to the Constitution of the United States, which kind of has the outline of how many we each get. Mike Enzi is also the other senator, and then Cynthia Lummis is the House member. All 3 of us spent time in the Wyoming legislature. So I don't know how many of you know Jerry Geis, who's the state senator from here. I've been in the state senate. I always referred to him as my fearless leader, because I was in the state senate with him for 5 years, and he's somebody that I've gotten to know and respect and really look up to. And he and I were on the transportation committee together, and he's just always been very helpful and very encouraging. So I have a great affinity for Washakie County and Moreland. I don't know how many of you know the Lass family, Con Lass. They live here a long, big generation, up through the generations. But Con Lass, the son, is in Washington most of the time, comes home for Thanksgiving and Christmas in Moreland. But he worked on the Hill, and now he's actually lobbies for some major folks around the country. So Moreland is always on my mind. And then the final thing is my wife Bobby. She was a Bobcat, went to Thermopolis, went to Hot Springs County High School, so I think that she always liked the Moreland guys best, but fortunately I was captured the prize at the end. So I'm happy to answer questions if there are things on your mind. I know different groups are studying different parts of history. There's a lot going on. The President gave his State of the Union, his final State of the Union, on Tuesday night in Washington. I was on the escort committee to walk him into the chamber, but I'm delighted it's his final State of the Union, because I think so many of his policies were not really good for Wyoming or for the Rocky Mountain West. And I chair the Senate Western Caucus. So the magic of the way that the world is communicating, I said, you need to have a constitution, but I think you also need an iPhone. So I know some of you see them on your desks. To stay attached, to stay connected, to stay communicating, you need to do that. The President this morning put out a new dictate on coal that impacts our energy in Wyoming, and tweeted out on my way here my criticism of the President on these regulations. And while we were driving over here, Fox News actually read my tweet to the country. So you can get a lot done, even here from Moreland, Wyoming, which is why I wanted to come here to the classroom, visit with you, answer your questions, but to say how no matter where you are in the country, you can have an influence on things as long as you're aggressively out there promoting the things that you believe in. So that I could talk for the longest time, and sometimes senators have a tendency to do that. So why don't I stop, and if any of you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but then we can get into issues or discussions or even a debate. Okay, who's first?
Senator, I've got to speak on behalf of Mary Linneman. Mary is very politically active, maybe the most politically active kid I've got in both classes. And she's on a debate meet today, but she sent me a text message this morning and said, if you get a chance, please ask the senator what he thinks of Donald Trump and what chance he thinks Donald Trump has of gaining the Republican nomination.
It's well, as you're studying this and you look at the presidents up here, I mean, that's the question: who's coming here? I mean, that's really the question now. After the president's final State of the Union, who's going to be 45? Who's going to be the 45th president of the United States? I don't know. I'll get to the specifics of that candidate and her question. Does she want to be president of the United States, do you think?
I think she would have aspirations. She's very political, very conservative.
Good.
And I think at this point might be thinking that might be the fellow for the country. So,
well, I would like her to be actually the first woman president of the United States for a couple of reasons. One, it would be great to have a president from Wyoming. We had a vice president from Wyoming. And if she were the first woman president of the United States, that means that Hillary Clinton would not of the United States. As you know, I don't know who's going to get the nomination. They had another debate last night. Donald Trump is leading in the polls. Ted Cruz is second. Ted's a senator. I work with him. I've been to Afghanistan with him, been to Israel with him, so we travel quite a bit. I've been a number of places with Marco Rubio, he's a senator. Rand Paul is also, so I know these guys. I'm the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee in the Senate, which means we have a policy committee lunch every Tuesday, of which I chair the meeting, and we have, you know, tables where they go through the buffet line, get food, sit at the tables. And it's interesting, if you're trying to be the chairman of the policy committee, you want policies that unite your party, conservative policies. And so Ted Cruz will be at one of the tables, and Marco will be at another table, and Rand Paul will be at a third table. And Lindsey Graham, who dropped out of the race, but this morning endorsed Jeb Bush, he will be at another table. So you're trying to unite the party, but at the same time, they're all trying to kind of get one up and elbow the other guy out of the way. So that's the challenge of it. You know, you need 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. I can tell you, no matter which one of those people on the stage last night gets the Republican nominee, that person will carry Wyoming, and they'll carry Texas. And they will lose California, and they will lose New York. I mean, it's just kind of the way that the demographics of the country work. To win the presidency, you have to win in states that kind of can go either way. And it's Florida, Ohio, Virginia, Colorado, Nevada. When I say can go either way, I'm talking about states that maybe voted for Bush but voted for Obama. And you know, so because a lot of states, there are, of the 270 electoral votes that you need, 248 of them, which is almost there. They've gone Democrat the last 6 times. They went for Clinton twice, they went for Obama twice, they went for John Kerry, and they went for Al Gore. So it's not likely that the Republicans are going to carry those states. So we need to nominate somebody. I always say we want to nominate the most conservative person who can win in November. And we're not there yet. So I think that after, within the next month, we will have been through New Hampshire, we will have been through Iowa, and I think they're going to have a fewer number of candidates. And then I think it's going to get much more serious and focused. Who else has a question? Somebody else has a question? Oh, come on, I didn't come to this question. I didn't come all the way here. You guys are going to come to Washington, and you got to have a lot of questions. Yeah?
Do you think history can repeat itself?
I think it doesn't actually repeat itself per se, but it kind of rhymes. It echoes things, so you do see that you see the cyclical nature of things. It does work that way. So, and a lot of that is going to be the question now. And I read a book about how popes get elected. There are cycles over the centuries of how popes get elected. And a lot of times you're not looking for just another carbon copy of the one that left in terms of how history does it repeat itself or not. So often you're looking for a remedy of what happened. You want to try to do some kind of, you don't want a repeat of what we just had. You want a solution that actually repairs some of the damage that's done. And I think a lot of the concern with the country now, where 70% of the people think the country's heading in the wrong direction, going to swing back this way. So I think you do have these pendulum swings, but not just in elections in the United States. It's a world type event. It's been too long. Canada just did it with Trudeau, with the election there to the Prime Minister. Very different than the guy he replaced. But before that, his father was the Prime Minister. So, you do see that goes from one to, so it's all, I think you see that all around the world. And some of the things that are happening around the world now with the Middle East, the Shias and the Sunnis, and there have been battles back and forth there since, 1,400 years ago. The only difference is that the weapons are more sophisticated now, the communication is more instant. So we know what's happening around the world much more quickly. But I think some of these things have just been a repeat of history over the centuries. So if you don't learn history, it's really hard to kind of be able to predict the future. As Winston Churchill said, the further behind I look, the further into the future I can see. Yes?
What's your opinion on Obama's executive order for gun control, and how do you think that's going to affect for you?
I'm opposed to all of the things he's done. He's trying to go in a direction opposite the Constitution. I mean, the Second Amendment is really clear. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We know what that means. But from his time, even when he was in the Senate, he and I were in the U.S. Senate together. He was a senator before he became president. We were on the Foreign Relations Committee together. I mean, he's been against the things that we think of as our Second Amendment rights. He's tried to do things with legislation, pass laws to limit our Second Amendment rights. They've all failed. And they failed because both Republicans and Democrats are against what the president has been trying to do. So he couldn't even get a number, when he had overwhelming number of Democrats in the majority, and Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House, he couldn't get this stuff passed because people, certainly from the Rocky Mountain West, are against what he's trying to do. So he tends to do these end runs around Congress saying, the things that we learn in the classroom, he says, forget about those things. If you don't pass a law, I'm going to do it anyway. Well, the Founding Fathers set up the 3 branches of government to try to make sure that we had the balance there. The president wants to ignore Congress and do things, and then we go and sue him, and then the Supreme Court often will says his executive actions are illegal. That's what happened with amnesty. We'll go to do the same thing with what he's trying to do with guns. But he just has a very different view of the world than I think most of us have here in Wyoming. So we're going to stop that.
He's stated he's never owned a gun and he's only shot one a few times, so how does he think that he can make an executive order based off that, considering he's never really...
Yeah, I think, just because a politician doesn't know anything about something doesn't stop them from speaking about those sorts of things on a lot of areas. So I know that's a requirement, but I think what is a requirement is the Constitution. So whether he knows things about a lot of different things. I mean, the Bill of Rights, as I'm sure Randy's talked about, the Bill of Rights has to do with what the government can't do to us. It's about our freedoms, and the Second Amendment is critical, but so is the First Amendment. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all the various freedoms that we have that are outlined here in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution talk about what a government can't do to us, and a president can't do it either. That's what. So I go back to the founding document rather than his knowledge about things. Now, in terms of knowledge, I like to try to get other senators from around the country to come here and see what we do to protect this incredibly beautiful state that we have, because they think, well, you guys, you have oil, you have gas, you have coal, you must be big polluters. I said, look at this place. It's, the people that are the best stewards of the land are the people on the land. They're the ranchers, they're the farmers, they're the people that use the lands and protect it because they want it protected for the next generation. So it's always interesting if you get somebody from Washington to come out here and actually look at the way we do it. They say, oh, you guys do a pretty good job. Yes, we do. So you don't know much about it? Go home. Yeah. Legislative. Yes, somebody else. Yeah.
How do you see the state of education in Wyoming?
Okay, the question was, well, how do I see the state of education in Wyoming? We are the only state in the country that has something like the Hathaway Scholarship. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Hathaway Scholarship. Yeah. We're the only place in the country, it is the best bang for your buck, so you don't have to end up out of school with these huge debt burdens that you hear the president talk about in the State of the Union. And the reason that we have the Hathaway Scholarship is we have a lot of tax money came into the state because of our energy. Coal, oil, natural gas was really the big one that put all this money into this. And some people said, what should we do with the money? I mean, that's a legitimate question. What do you do with the money? And the debate in the legislature was, some people said, well, let's just figure out how many people live in the state, divide up the money, send everybody a check for so much money, okay? And then there were 4 of us that said, let's invest in the next generation. There were 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats that came together and came up with this idea of putting the money into a big account so the interest could pay for everybody's education, if you wanted. So you can go to the community college, you can go to the university, and it's the only place where you don't have to compete against somebody else for a scholarship. I mean, most of the time, if you want a scholarship and you want a scholarship and there's only one, you got to compete against each other. Here, the only competition is yourself. You got to keep your grades up and stay out of trouble, and you can get one of these. And then beyond that, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I practiced medicine in Casper for 25 years. Demian Yakel, one of my partners, grew up, went to school here, and now he's practicing in Casper. His grandmom's still here. We know the value of an education, and if anybody wants to go into medicine, we have an incredible opportunity also, to go through medical school and leave without debt. Now, there we want you to come back to Wyoming to practice after you get this exceptionally good training. But You know, we are invested fully in education. And then last 2 weeks, a couple weeks ago, we passed this kind of Every Student Achieves Act, which is the idea is to get the power out of Washington and give it back to the classrooms in Wyoming, the local communities. Jillian Barlow, the superintendent of education, was on the radio this morning talking about the fact that this was a good piece of legislation to kind of replace No Child Left Behind, so that the decisions that wouldn't be made in Washington, they'd go back to the states, and the superintendent for the state of Wyoming, she said, and I'm going to send it right to the counties. So that, because I think the best thing for education is when students and parents and teachers all work together, and that's what we have the opportunity to do here in Washington County.
Sandra, I got to piggyback just a second. I spent my first 28 years in Montana, and I've been here 8 years, and I want to emphasize the kids too. It's unbelievable to my former colleagues in Montana what these kids get out of Hathaway and what this state puts into education. I've never seen anything like it. So we all should be very, very appreciative of what our government has done in Wyoming to help you kids get to school.
Yeah.
Obamacare's been a pretty big issue lately. There was another vote to repeal it pretty recently. And you mentioned your background in the medical field. What do you think, I don't know, if you could just talk a little bit about
Sure.
what Obamacare does, not only as a senator, but as a former healthcare provider?
Yeah, and you're 100% right, because as a doctor, what I want is for more people to get better care at lower costs. The Worland every year has the health fair, the Wyoming Health Fair. We have a big thing in Worland where people go get their blood tested, and I've been the medical director of the Wyoming Health Fairs for over 20 years. It's the idea of helping people get better health and better information about their health so they can make right decisions. So I think this healthcare law that says Washington knows best is wrong. I think the best people are the people locally. And I think whenever Washington comes up with one size fits all, if Washington think it works there, it's not going to work in Washington County. It's just not on anything. So healthcare is a big part of it. I've heard from too many people, former patients, friends, neighbors, people in Wyoming, who had insurance that worked pretty well for them. But according to the president's law, it wasn't good enough for him. So they couldn't keep that. And his law said that insurance companies couldn't even sell that anymore. They had to buy a whole different level of insurance that they didn't want, need, or can afford. So that's what happens, I think, whenever government comes in and says, we know what's better for you. Because they don't want anything. And healthcare is, so we're trying to actually repeal it. We put a repeal bill on the president's desk, which of course he vetoed. But the idea was that to show that if you get a Republican president in the White House,
It's going through.
it's going to get signed into law. So that was the part of that. The other parts of it, just in terms of your own health, I had a chance to meet yesterday with a guy named James Park. I don't know if you know him. He's from San Francisco. He invented and developed the Fitbit. Many of you have kind of seen these wristwatch things that can monitor how many steps you take, how many flights of steps you've gone up, your sleep patterns. So as we get more knowledgeable about things, and the healthcare apps that are available here are just remarkable. They have the technology. So for people with asthma, there's some incredible apps to help people with asthma that you don't necessarily need to get to the doctor. You just get to this. In terms of a place like Wyoming with medicine, there's a new case for some of these where there's little metal strips, and you put 2 fingers on one side and 2 fingers on the other side. It gets your EKG there, right there on the screen, which then gets sent to your cardiologist, who may be in Casper or in Billings, or wherever your cardiologist, to say, am I having a heart attack, if you're somebody with heart problems, or did I just have a bad burrito last night and it's just really indigestion and heartburn? So there's incredible advances that are coming with a lot of things that Steve Jobs came up with, a guy that brilliantly saw the future in ways that most people can't. So we have all of those advances, and yet the government is trying to come up with ways that I think are taking us backwards. And that was my discussion with them. We were in Baltimore yesterday. We had a meeting with all the House and the Senate at a retreat. Then they asked me to chair the discussion on healthcare. So we brought in to see what's new in technology. This guy with Fitbit, he went to Harvard and quit, just like Bill Gates. Bill Gates went to Harvard and quit. It's because they just, their minds were on fire and they had so many things that they wanted to do. Okay, thanks. Who's next? She's telling me I don't. Your class goes till what, 10:30?
Well, the bell rang a couple minutes, but I have permission
going.
for the kids to stay.
All
So
right.
when the bell rings, we can shut the door and continue, or
All
you
right.
can go whenever you need to.
Any other questions? Yeah.
What do you think about the United States letting in refugees from Syria?
Yeah, the big question, we can spend the rest of the time on the whole issue of what's happening around the world. I want to push a pause button on that for a couple of reasons. You know, this threat from ISIS is real. ISIS stands for the Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria. Now, for the Syrian refugees, and I don't know if there's not a world map here, but I spent some time Tuesday with the King of Jordan, and we asked some of those questions. So the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, he's a remarkable guy. We'll get a king on this. We asked him something about that, and he said, "That's above my pay grade." What in the world is above the pay grade of the king? You know, it's like, that's way up there. But in terms of the refugee, because they have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of refugees from Syria come into Jordan, and they have refugee camps. Most people that are trying to get out of Syria, realistically, they're trying to leave to stay alive. Assad, who's in charge of Syria, I don't know how much you guys have been studying this stuff, Assad, the guy that's in charge of Syria, he has been killing the people of that country. So he's killed over 250,000 people. If you live there, you want to get out. You're trying to avoid, because you have friends and neighbors and relatives killed, so you're trying to get out. I think 4 million people have left the country, all through Europe and down into Jordan and other places in the area. And some are trying to come to the United States. The Canada said they want to take 25,000. President Obama said 10,000. 10,000 or 25,000 compared to 4 million who are on the move is like, it doesn't solve the problem. If you actually want to solve the problem for the refugees, you want to